Well, to be honest, I didn't see this one coming. Audiences and critics coming together to absolutely destroy Netflix's recent Queen Cleopatra docudrama, they called it, and the drama is that it's not a documentary. And that's a major problem because what you have in this is a piece of fiction. Which, if this were a piece of fiction, if it were just some movie or some TV show and they cast a black woman to play Cleopatra, people would complain, but ultimately it wouldn't be that big of a deal. There have been black women that have played Cleopatra for decades. This isn't anything new, it's not anything special. But the problem is that you called it a documentary. And you made it very clear that you didn't care about the historical accuracy, you didn't care about the region, you didn't care about the culture, you didn't care about the people. The only thing that you cared about was yourself. And why is that? Well, because the showrunners are filled with people like Jada Pinkett Smith. You know, I could have told you that that was probably a bad idea to get somebody as delusional and egotistical as her to be part of any project that you're working on, but it seems like they have their own vision, you know? So who am I to get in their way? I'm just here to point out the obvious, ridiculous nature of this entire situation. This show got absolutely lambasted, and of course, the people involved in this, what do you think their response was? Do you think it was to gracefully accept the criticism, to learn from it, to grow from it, and to say, going forward, we're going to take this advice into account? No, it was to blame it on white supremacy. And we're going to be looking at a couple videos that go over that because, wow, you just accused the people of Egypt of being white supremacists. That is stunning. That level of hubris and ego and delusion and entitlement, it's on a whole other level. And diving into the topic of race for just a brief moment, because I apparently am the only person on the planet that is not completely crippled by the topic of race out of fear, and also not completely hating a group of people based on their skin color. I think my upbringing, my exposure to many different types of people, for the fact that I just genuinely don't have that guilt or that negative feelings towards any one group of people. So let me just be perfectly honest. I think that the black community's narrative around their history is laughable because you have two different competing narratives that exist simultaneously. And they should be in conflict with each other, but somehow, some way, people like Jada Pinkett Smith have managed to try to combine these two things that are incongruent. They cannot go together. So that is the narrative that black people are oppressed, and the other narrative that black people have historically been oppressors. What I mean by that? Well, the ancient Egyptians were black. Well, if the ancient Egyptians were black, that means that they were slave owners. Do you see how this narrative sort of falls apart? Because for the longest time, I've heard while watching documentaries about Haiti that Haiti, the Haitians, overthrew their occupiers, overthrew their slavers, and fighting against your oppressor is a noble, righteous thing. So, thereby, you could say that what happened to the black community was a result of them enslaving people. But you see, that's just examining what they believe on the face of it. Now, we know that that's not true. We know that the ancient Egyptians weren't black. And we also know that historically, that black people were not victims, at least not of this grand imperial scheme. No, the sad reality that no one ever wants to deal with because it's uncomfortable and it doesn't feel good is that you had tribes in Africa that weren't singing around, the drum kumbaya. No, they were fighting against each other. And unfortunately, the bigger tribe would kill the smaller tribe, would take the women, would take the resources. The kids would usually be used as labor. I mean, they weren't treated very well. I mean, it was not very good. And then that tribe would be conquered by somebody bigger. And that is the history. And you look at real documentaries like Shaka Zulu, and you see what the culture was like. It was war, it was brutal. These were warriors in many cases, and not The Woman King, which is a complete work of fiction, not based at all on the true story, which I have to say, in regards to The Woman King, I'm actually glad that it came out because that movie, being so historically inaccurate, it forced people to learn the real history of what happened. And I think that was a very good thing because people were educated on what actually happened. That this tribe of, brilliant woman warriors, well, first of all, these women weren't that brilliant as warriors. In fact, they were fucking atrocious. They were awful. You heard the thing about 500 or 600 of these women warriors got absolutely massacred to kill about 6 French soldiers. I think it was French or the English. So yeah, the embellishments are there. But you see, even with The Woman King, it's a work of fiction. They say it's based on a true story. It's not. But that still is a work of fiction, which is why people don't really have that big of an issue with it. I do from a moral perspective because you're basically taking this barbaric, slave owning, evil group of people in Africa and saying, no, 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 they were the benevolent good guys, even though they sacrificed slaves. I'm sure the slaves that were sacrificed don't really appreciate the fact that their butchers were glorified by Western culture in order to appeal modern sensibilities. But no, it's just a reality. You have these two incongruent worldviews that exist at the same time, and they can't. So that's why you see things like this from time to time. Because Jada Pinkett Smith is desperate enough for victim points and attention that she'll be like, oh, we're an oppressor and we aren't represented and Oscar's so white and all that stuff. But at the same time, I want to see myself in, Queen Cleopatra and these world leaders. We want to be the rulers of history and also the victims of history. And we want that to be at the same time, make one movie one day about us being victims, and the next day, we're the kings of the world. My answer to that is no, and we're gonna laugh at you because that's a preposterous proposal. It's as preposterous as saying, well, there were black people who were Nordic Vikings. No, and I don't say this to be cruel to black people in general. I say this because it's absurd. It's absurd. It would be as absurd as white people saying that John Wayne was actually Genghis Khan because he played Genghis Khan in a movie or a TV show. An old school piece of entertainment. John Wayne, who was one of the big stars in the world, played Genghis Khan. So, that's obviously not historically accurate. But if I came out with a documentary and said, well, we can't really know what Genghis Khan looked like, he'd probably look like John Wayne. I imagine that the Mongolians would probably have a huge issue with that. And rightfully so. So, that's my take on this particular topic from a philosophical and from a race-based point of view. I think that you have people like Jada Pinkett Smith and many others, this actress right here, that are so up their own ass, so in love with themselves, because they're part of this Hollywood cult that just circle jerks each other off and tells each other how amazing they are and beautiful and stunning they are, and we can do anything we want because People like this live in a delusional world where their fantasies can become reality just by them saying it. And they are in such an affirmation circle jerk that no one's going to burst their bubble because every one of them is living in a bubble. And if you pop one, then someone will pop yours. So they just live in this fog of lies, delusion, and bullshit and narcissism to a degree that is so unhealthy. It's like eating 1,000 cheeseburgers from Burger King in a week. So we have a couple videos that I want to look at. First of which is from, I think I'll do the one from Tyrone Magnus first. We're not going to watch the whole video. But I did want to go through this because I did think that there was a lot in here that is worth talking about. And Tyrone Magnus is somebody that is very different from me in terms of his opinions and in terms of his perspective. Tyrone Magnus is somebody that has made it very clear that he's proud to be black. He wears like black pride t-shirts and stuff like that. Now, I think that, race-based pride is silly. I think it's ridiculous. You can have pride in your culture, but what really even is black culture in America? You look at all this stuff. All this stuff was built on other cultures. Japanese, European, American, I think it's beautiful. It's a combination of things that are harmonious. I love seeing stuff like this, especially Dragon Ball Z. It's phenomenal.
I have not done a deep dive on this. Growing up,
your bug spray should take out bugs, not keep out people. Unlike other sprays that stick around, Zevo goes from kill to clean in just seconds. Plus, it's safe for use around people and pets.
Good? Good.
Zevo. People-friendly, bug-deadly.
Don't ever buy this product.
Abby started making pecan chicken salad again.
Oh, God. Oh, God.
it was my understanding that Cleopatra was black. Then I heard she was Greek. Then I heard she was black. Then I heard she was Greek.
She is 100% not black. Yeah. Nobody thinks that she was black. No one has ever really thought that she was black. All the experts, all of the historical material, the statues, the coins, just about everything have established that she was Greek.
Then I heard she was black, and then I heard she was Greek again. I don't know what to believe. Maybe she was mixed. I don't know. I've heard about the uproar that Egypt has had something to say for me.
Damn right.
Damn
right.
Majority
Egypt comes
of the race thinking that that's the reason why people are fighting that much over.
Which is to unite. We live in a divided world, dear viewer. It seems like even the most innocuous subjects or the most fundamental aspects of reality are now subject to constant debate and contention. And nowhere is that division more obvious than in the world of media, where every new movie and TV show becomes a battleground between warring factions, each determined to prove that they're in the right.
I don't know if I agree with that. I think, there is some truth to it, but I think that more often it's a group of narcissistic, spiteful, hateful, delusional weirdos doing something so outside of the norm and in the bounds of that particular series that people react. I don't think it's necessarily a faction of people, because I don't find myself in agreement on many other issues with those who criticize things like, Star Wars, for example. You look at people like, what's his name? A Den of Nerds or something. I looked at that guy's timeline, and, we both agree that the sequels of Star Wars are bad, but we're not part of a faction. We're not part of a group together. We just both recognize this thing is bad. On most other things, like politics and other stuff like that, we wouldn't agree on much of anything. So I don't know if it's a faction so much as a loose coalition of people that just don't like shit content.
But sometimes, just sometimes, a project comes along that's so monumentally, epically, and comprehensively terrible that it manages to unite the entire world in absolute contempt. It happened before with Santa Inc., a theoretical comedy made by two talentless, mean-spirited hacks posing as comedians who haven't actually produced anything remotely funny in more than a decade, which tried to use feminism and identity politics to attack the literal personification of goodwill and generosity. A bit like calling Inglorious Bastards a historically accurate depiction of World War II, but don't worry, we'll get back to that soon enough. Believe that. The show kicked up a firestorm of controversy and backlash, earned its entire country of Egypt. Damn man, this thing's about as popular as the salad bar at Lizzo's birthday party. So why are people so fucking mad about this thing anyway? Well, the main criticism centres around the recasting of Cleopatra. Sorry, reimagining. Because I guess that's what we call it now when we blatantly try to rewrite verified historical facts to suit our own 21st century narrative and gaslight anyone who calls us out on our bullshit as hateful bigots. Kind of like how the Woman King tried to reimagine a brutal expansionist military dictatorship who massacred entire communities and happily sold their own people into slavery as a progressive and enlightened society to be cherished and protected, and a unit of female warriors who once lost more than 500 troops to kill a grand total of 6 French soldiers as an elite fighting force that would make the Avengers shit themselves in absolute terror.
I think I can smell shite.
You know...
By the way, they've been doing that forever, though. They really have. It's like you go back, and especially a lot of older movies, like the Native Americans are white. Like everybody in Egypt is white. Like all these different movies, they've been doing this forever. I just want them to get it right. Can we just get it right? It's not tit for tat. Let's not call it tit for tat. Let's not do that, you know? If y'all don't know what that is, it's like, oh, so you used to whitewash stuff 40 years ago. All right, we gonna start blackwashing stuff. You got what I'm saying? Like, no, let's just write things. Let's do the right thing by all people. Okay? If the character's Asian, they're Asian. They're Greek, they're Greek. They're black, they're African, they're brown, whatever. That's what they are, and make them that. That's how I see it.
I actually agree with him, but here's where he's wrong. There's a world of difference, and I think that the drinker explains this. There's a world of difference between doing that and calling it entertainment, calling it a movie. Like, you're going to the movies. I don't think that Bruce Willis is actually trapped at the top of a skyscraper, looking to, make his way down to the bottom floor and stop the bad guys. I understand that I'm watching a movie. This is John McClane. He's an actor. He's playing a role. This is not a historically accurate documentary. That's the problem here. That they have taken this historical figure and they have said this is a documentary. This is going to reflect the real life Cleopatra. This isn't a movie. This isn't a television show. This is Cleopatra, and then they race swapped her. That is not in any way comparable to Native Americans being played by white people. By the way, white people playing Moses and the Pharaoh in the Ten Commandments. Charleston. Am I having a fucking stroke? What was his name again? Hold on, let me look it up real quick. Charlton? No. Carlton Carlton Heston. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that I got that right. Oh, he was also in Ben-Hur. Yeah, that was a great movie, Ben-Hur. And the Ten Commandments. God, this guy... And Planet of the Apes. Wow. This guy was in a lot of really good stuff. I kind of want to watch Ben-Hur now. Anyway, my point was that Carlton, whatever the hell his name is, Charlton Heston. God, that's a bizarre name. Carlton Heston. This doesn't sound right. Anyway, Carlton Heston playing a role of Moses, who was not white. That's a movie. Understand? It's not an actual documentary just because it's taking place based on a true event that people believe. They're not billing it as a documentary. Like, a documentary is what you see on, any number of, informative channels. Like, oh, let's watch, the Discovery Channel about polar bears. And, well, they're actually black bears. It's like, no, I was watching something on polar bears. Yeah, these are polar bears. It's like, no, they're black bears. Do you understand how that would be kind of an issue? It's like, and now we turn into our documentary on owls. It's like, that's a fucking pigeon. Do you understand? It's not the same. It's not at all the same.
No, it's always funny watching Hollywood activists combing the pages of history in search of some hidden truth that'll finally validate all their long-standing biases and personal hang-ups, and when they inevitably come up short, just kind of throwing up their hands and saying, fuck it, we'll just make it up instead. Sorry, reimagine it. The thing is, works of historical fiction like The Woman King, or Braveheart, or 300 generally get cut a bit of slack because, well, the clue's in the name. They're works of fiction. Yeah, fiction based on real events, very loosely in some cases, but fiction all the same. I'm not a huge fan of it myself because I know how many people can be misled by stuff like this, but hey, I also wasn't born yesterday. Real history is often muddy and complex and doesn't deliver the big, satisfying emotional payoffs that people expect from movies.
That's true. Yeah, I definitely heard about Braveheart not going the way they said. I saw some documentary that I was kind of watching haphazardly while doing other stuff, and they were talking about, just from their armor to other things, and the way he died, and certain things were just a little different, and what he said, and all this stuff was different. Of course, 300, badassery. We know it wasn't all these grotesque monsters and stuff like that back then, and, stuff like that. So I think it's when they push it as being full historical. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if this was pushed as a work of fiction based on history or not.
Nope.
But I think that does make a difference.
Makes
when you're like, this is a fictional account of a historical event. So it's going to embellish, it's going to have some, stuff.
So the way I see it, there are three categories. There's documentary, there's sort of like a blending of the two, and then there's just pure fiction. So the blending of the two, it can come in, it has subcategories. One of them can be, it's loosely based on a true story, but it's not actually accurate to the story. It's just based on a true story. The other one is you bill it as a documentary, but you change pretty much everything about it. Like, The Woman King, I think, falls into that category. Because it is a work of fiction, but they tried very, very hard to say this is actually what happened. Like, based on actual events, based on an actual tribe that actually existed. And it turns out that the tribe was a group of just evil, just slave sacrificing, grotesque, just inhumanly cruel individuals that also had women warriors, but they also sucked and got the shit kicked out of them. But Hollywood's never going to tell that because, woman power and all that. Yeah.
If it's on point and some stuff that's not, I think that definitely makes a difference.
Telling compelling stories that people want to see sometimes means bending and embellishing the truth. Documentaries are a very different beast, though, because the whole point is to give the audience an accurate and unbiased insight into real events, backed up by facts and evidence from eyewitnesses and experts in the relevant fields. Their very purpose is to separate fact from fiction and delve deeper into the actual reality behind the myths and commonly held beliefs. And that's where Cleopatra runs into a spot of trouble, because the whole motivation of this show seems to be the exact opposite. It's there to bend and distort reality, to turn her into something she absolutely wasn't, in order to fit the narrative of the showrunners. See, the stated goal of the African Queens series is to shed light on important black female rulers throughout history, unknown and overlooked people who actually had a big impact on the world. As producer Jada Pinkett Smith said, we don't often get to see or hear stories about black queens, and that was really important for me, as well as for my daughter, and just for the community to be able to know those stories, because there's tons of them. Fair play, Jada.
Oh, come on.
For memories that last and produce that lasts longer.
I can totally get behind that one. After all, there's plenty of historical people and events that haven't had the mainstream attention that they deserve. The problem I suspect they ran into with this one is that female rulers of organised nation-states in sub-Saharan Africa that had a major and lasting impact on world history are probably a bit thin on the grounds. And rather than dig deeper to find more obscure figures that might not have mainstream appeal, they just decided, fuck it, we'll just take Cleopatra and make her ours now. Fuck. Because everyone knows about Cleopatra, right? She's the kind of name that will bring your series a lot of attention. And if you can somehow convince enough people that she was actually black all along, then you'll earn yourself a lot of praise from your big friends in Hollywood. Because after all, how do we really know what Cleopatra looked like?
I definitely would have put it this way: if she really is Greek and she's not black, then you shouldn't try to wash it that way. And I don't care if there's, because I didn't know about the Dahomey. I didn't know about them until they did the movie. And I heard it wasn't accurate, but I really liked the movie anyway.
Well, yeah, because it's a movie. Tyrone, it's a movie, and you're allowed to like the movie. The tribe itself, pure fucking evil. The most grotesque evil people on the fucking planet. They would sacrifice slaves in the hundreds. I mean, it was just so horrific and so abhorrent. But the thing is, Hollywood was not ever going to let that story see the light of day, not the real story. But the fiction is sort of like the continuation of Wakanda. It is selling black people on a fantasy. And the fantasy that black people want to live in is that their history was rife with victory. That's really all it is. They're trying to sell black people on this delusion that your history was victory. I'm here to be the bearer of bad news. I'm here to be the morning after you've had a bit too much to drink. The history of sub-Saharan Africa is one of conquering, conquest, rape, pillage, slavery. It's brutal. We're talking warriors, savages. And I don't mean savages like, oh, well, he's a savage. No, I mean like legitimate savages. I mean, these people would get into tribes and go and fuck up somebody's entire, not just their day. They'd erase their entire rivals or enemies' village from the planet. They'd take the women, they'd rape them, they'd get them pregnant, they'd have workers, they'd have kids, they'd sell them off. This shit was brutal. Absolutely brutal. And then that tribe would get conquered by another tribe. So understand, the history of Africa is not like some Wakanda enlightened, beautiful, benevolent, kind, peaceful history. Although, you could say that pretty much about anyone's history. But for some people, there are massive wins in there to compensate for that. And for black people, unfortunately, you don't really have many of those. So Hollywood is saying, all right, well, we want to give you a win. We want to give you a victory. And so they let Jada Pinkett Smith come in and say, we're changing, Cleopatra. Now she's one of ours. That's a huge win for us. That's a huge win for her, realistically. She doesn't really care about other people, clearly, by the way she treats Will Smith. But that's the truth. That's what they're selling here. They're selling black people the fantasy of Wakanda, of a proud, illustrious history. And they're willing to sacrifice pretty much anyone else's culture or history or historical figures to do it.
You know what I'm saying? Tyron 300. I know it wasn't accurate. They said Leonidas didn't even last till the end. He died earlier in the battle.
Nope, the battle.
So you know what I mean? Like, it's a lot of different stuff. So, but where was I going with it? Oh, I would have definitely taken obscure women and rulers that I never heard of.
Yep.
Because I found it fascinating to watch the Woman King. I really did. I thought it was very interesting, and I went into it knowing that, things could be changed or whatever, just like in the...
Oh, Tyrone, you did not learn anything accurate about that tribe. Not a single goddamn thing, other than there were women warriors. That was pretty much it. The morality, the culture, pretty much everything is 180 degrees. It's like, but it's a movie, so it can do that. It can take those liberties because it's a creative liberty. But I just think it's really quite interesting that Tyrone is like, well, I really like the movie, which is perfectly fine, and I learned all this stuff about this tribe. It's like, no, no, this tribe was pure fucking evil. Tyrone, do you understand? This tribe was huge into the slave trade, but they weren't protecting the slaves. They weren't fighting against slavery. They were sacrificing hundreds of slaves to some pagan god because they thought that, that was what you did. You sacrificed innocent people that have done nothing wrong in the hundreds. So, yeah. Yeah, and they didn't have some kind of like revelation that it was bad. No. It just, it's always fascinating to me to watch the development of these entertainment properties. But you have people like, oh, I learned about that. It's like, oh yeah, I learned a lot about Greek mythology by watching Disney's by watching Disney's Hercules. It's like, no.
Other movies, changed stuff, 300, Braveheart, whatever.
Walden University is all about
God,
change.
there's so many ads.
It's time.
It is time for the best part of my day. I drink a factor smoothie
Don't buy
every
this.
single morning.
Don't buy any
And
of this
sometimes
shit.
Popular, low-hanging fruit, you know what I mean?
It's not like her Macedonian Greek heritage was a well-documented matter of verified historical record, or that we have countless portraits, statues, busts, friezes, and even coins with her face on
I
them,
never knew that.
all depicting her with classical Greek facial features.
Okay.
Oh wait. But hey, maybe they've
never
got
knew
some
that.
awesome new evidence that's just come to light, or compelling testimony from respected figures in their fields.
I imagine her to have curly hair like me and a similar skin colour.
I remember my grandmother saying to me, I don't care what they tell you in school, Cleopatra was black.
Well, if your senile old gran reckons that a Ptolemaic ruler born thousands of years before her lifetime was black, then I'm convinced.
Yes, I can definitely smell shite.
But it really gives you an insight into the mindset of the showrunners on this one. The childly simplistic idea that if you choose to believe in something, then it just magically becomes the truth, even if all the evidence at your disposal says the exact opposites. It's the same reason that I'm not actually 200 feet tall and made out of solid gold. Shit, man, even the Egyptians have gone to war against this thing. The head of the Supreme Council for Antiquities, Mustafa Waziri, said that calling Cleopatra black would be a falsification of Egyptian history, and that Netflix is trying to stir up confusion to spread false information that the origin of Egyptian civilization is black. See, that's the problem with trying to appropriate an actual documented historical figure and pass off your bullshit wish fulfillment fantasy as a legit, unbiased documentary. You really have to provide receipts to back it up, and if the best you can come up with is, my gran told me to believe a comforting lie to make me feel better about myself, then funnily enough, people are going to push back against it. So how do you think the showrunners reacted to this backlash? Did they take this criticism on the chin, acknowledge the complaints, and apologise for any offence caused? You serious? Well, not really, no. Why shouldn't Cleopatra be a melanated sister? Series director Tina Garavi asks. And why do some people need Cleopatra to be white? Her proximity to whiteness seems to give her value, and for some Egyptians, it seems to really matter. No kidding, Tina. I suspect it does matter that you're trying to rewrite their own history for them and project 21st century American ideals onto something that you've got little or no understanding of. It's not just that I've directed a series that portrays Cleopatra as black, and that I've asked Egyptians to see themselves as Africans, and they're furious at me for that. I'm okay with this. Well, as long as you're okay with it, then I guess that's just fine. Never mind that you've insulted the cultural heritage of more than 100 million Egyptians and turned pretty much the entire internet against you and your shitty projects. The only thing that truly matters is what you want, what makes you happy, the truth that you choose to believe. You know, I'm trying to think of a phrase that best sums up this kind of mindset.
Sheer fucking hubris.
My man. All right, you know, I think I'll end it there. I don't want to play the whole thing, but I think I got my points in with Tyrone. I think this is a great video. Go check out and subscribe to his channel if you haven't. Now we move on to Nux Taco. This is a very interesting perspective. Nux is, well, you know, politically he's again very different to me. And I think that's a result of being big on Twitch and in the streaming world. You have to hang out with a certain group of people, be okay with a certain type of politics, and I'm just not. And so, yeah, just very, very different. But let's see what Nux has to say.
By the name of Queen Cleopatra. It is a new thing, and it is the most hated show of all time. For those of you that are unfamiliar, Queen Cleopatra is a Netflix show that's kind of like a documentary, except it was given a 1% on the audience score and an 11%.
All aspects of reality are now subject to constant debate and contentions. A project
something just unequivocally mid, something that's just boring. I love shitty media. Like, bad content is almost as good as good content. The worst thing you could possibly watch is something just unequivocally mid. Something that's just boring throughout, that's the worst thing, a 0. But a -10 is so bad you are laughing your ass off.
in absolute contempt. It happened before with Santa Inc., a theoretical comedy made by two talentless, mean-spirited hacks to attack the literal personification.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
And it seems to be happening again with the release of Queen, a Netflix male African
bastards. Now that was one
throughout history. I mean, calling it a documentary is a bit like calling
this clip from Inglourious Bastards. Now that was one of the movies of all time. If you haven't seen Inglourious Bastards, I think you'll enjoy it.
In Inglourious Bastards, a historically accurate depiction of World War II, but don't worry, we'll get back to that soon enough.
Ooh.
Believe that. The show kicked up a firestorm of controversy and backlash, earned itself the lowest rating that I've ever personally seen.
Velma stans are eating good right now, bro. At least Velma didn't get as bad of a score as Cleopatra.
On Rotten Tomatoes.
Bro.
And even managed to get itself sued on behalf of the entire country of Egypt.
No! Egypt sued Cleopatra?
Yep.
hilarious.
Oh man, this thing's about as popular as the salad bar at Lizzo's birthday party. So what?
Oh shit, man, really went there.
Why are people so fucking mad about this thing anyway? Well, the main criticism centers around the recasting of Cleopatra.
Ever wondered what the future of driving will look like? We are...
Sorry, reimagining, because I guess that's what we call it now when we brutal expands an absolute.
They called them an elite fighting force when they lost 500. They lost 500 soldiers to kill 6 dudes in the other army. And they're calling them in this documentary an elite fighting force. History really happened. You can't just be like, yes, history wasn't, it was too sexist in history that all these women lost a war. So we're just gonna change that. This isn't trying to promote a narrative. This is objective fact.
Terror.
I think I can smell shite.
You know, it's always funny watching Hollywood activists combing the pages of history in search of some hidden truth that'll finally validate all their long-standing biases and personal hang-ups, and when they inevitably come up short, just kind of throwing up their hands and saying, fuck it, we'll just make it up instead.
This dude is so famous. I would hate to be this guy.
Did you just misgender that person?
This very famous person is everywhere now. Nux doesn't see gender. True.
Sorry, reimagine it.
I'm enlightened.
The thing is, works of historical fiction like The Woman King or Braveheart or 300 generally get cut a bit of slack because, well,
they're
the clue's
fiction.
in the name. They're works of fiction.
Yeah,
fiction based on real events. Very loosely in some cases, but fiction all the same. I'm not a huge fan of it myself because I know how many people can be misled by stuff like this, but hey, I also wasn't born yesterday. Real history is often muddy and complex and doesn't deliver the big, satisfying emotional payoffs that people expect from movies. Telling compelling stories that people want to see sometimes means bending and embellishing the truth.
I'm with you. Like, for example, I think Vikings is one of the best shows I've ever seen in my life. And obviously it's not completely accurate. It does take a lot of inspiration from Viking history, but it's not completely accurate. Like, they somehow made like a whole family line between everyone. Like, they made Ivar the Boneless the brother of Bjorn Ironside, which is like, obviously they weren't. They weren't brothers. Like, give me a break. It's a drama that's loosely based in history, and that's totally fine. Who cares?
Documentaries are a very different beast though, because the whole point is to give the audience an accurate and unbiased insight into real events, backed up by facts and evidence from eyewitnesses and experts in the relevant fields. Their very purpose is to separate fact from fiction and delve deeper into the actual reality behind the myths and commonly held beliefs. And that's where Cleopatra runs into a spot of trouble, because the whole motivation of this show seems to be the exact opposite. It's there to bend and distort reality, to turn her into something she absolutely wasn't, in order to fit the narrative of the showrunners. See, the Jada Pinkett spoiled those stories because there's tons. Play Jada, I can suspect they ran into impact on Cleopatra, right? She's the
retrospective on how the Jews took over the world by the famous Jewish king Alexander the Great.
Because after all, how do we really know what Cleopatra looked like? It's not like her Macedonian Greek heritage was a well-documented matter of verified historical record, or that we have countless portraits, statues, busts, friezes, and even coins with her face on them, all depicting her with classical Greek facial features. Oh wait.
Damn.
But hey.
Damn, obliterated. Queen Cleopatra in the Fate franchise is better than this portrayal. Oh yes, my favorite character in history. Can we make a documentary on the legendary knight Astolfo and his throbbing bussy?
Okay, yeah. God damn it, Nux. Ugh. Anyway, hold on one second. I want to show you something. This is Cleopatra portrayed in a show from the from the 90s. Yeah. She is black, by the way, if you don't know. But do you know what the difference is between her playing Cleopatra and this documentary having Cleopatra be black? Well, the difference is that was a television show. That was entertainment. they got this actress to play Cleopatra. But they're not saying that that's historically accurate. In fact, I don't think anyone would accuse Xena Warrior Princess of being too historically accurate. But that's sort of the point here. You have a work of fiction versus something that's trying to be passed off as real, as legitimate, as history. And it is not. And people have reacted quite appropriately to absolutely vivisect this franchise, this IP, this concept. And I hope they go forward and take this energy to more franchises. Because it's absolutely unacceptable that you have people in America that feel comfortable taking another culture's figure and saying this is ours now. And we don't really care if you're upset about it because it's all about us. Well, I'll tell you that I find these women in Hollywood to be repellent. I find them to be some of the most ignorant, despicable, low IQ, bottom feeding pieces of garbage to ever roam our planet, because they continue to show an absolutely indefensible lack of any sort of ethic, any sort of standard. There's no introspection. There's no okay, maybe we messed up here. No, it's always somebody else's fault, because people like Jada Pinkett Smith are genuinely terrible people. Anyway, that'll do it for today's video, ladies and gentlemen. Let me know what you think in the comment section below, and I'll see you next time.